Welcome to the Wolverine Digest podcast, the best spot for objective and authentic coverage of Michigan athletics. If you want open dialogue, honest opinions, and in-depth coverage of the maize and blue, this is the podcast for you. And now, here's your host, Brandon Brown, joined as always by Chris Breiler.
I was going to start by saying go blue.
Welcome back, Mr. Breiler. Wednesday again.
Good to see you. Nightcap here. I feel like this is late, man. Like I was towards the end of the game, I was yawning a little bit. I got some coffee here, some caffeine in me. This whole one show a week thing is a bit of a struggle.
It is a little late. Obviously, the basketball game. With no football, it feels really like we have to give basketball a little bit of love. When football was going on, we were both like, are they even playing? Do they have a team? I don't know. Like, now that football's done.
I don't like life without football.
I know. Now that football's done, though, like it definitely feels like, okay, we've got to shine a light on basketball a little bit.
There it is. Yeah, shout out to the West Coast people who are getting to see us at a decent time here.
Hey, there you go. 6:44 out in Arizona. I know we've got some other people in other parts of the country and the world, really. So yeah, we'll make it work however we can. Basketball game started at 6:30, so it is what it is. We'll get it going at about 8:42 tonight here for our Wednesday show. And we're gonna. Does this look red? It's
got a reddish tint to it.
It's more like a flowing orange, an energetic red. Orange.
Energetic orange.
Yeah, it's an energetic orange. Actually,
is Chris, this red? No, it's energetic orange actually.
Chris, I will answer this question perfectly, and I know you'll appreciate it. Sean Bennett, why am I wearing this shirt? Had some running around to do today. It matches perfectly with the reddish orange color on the high res blue Yeezys, like perfectly. Okay, and it's nice. Adidas. So that you know how we and Chris have had some drip discussions. I don't know. We don't always see eye to eye,
Not always.
Think I like to match my gear with my shoes just a little bit, so that's why. I had a hoodie on. I always get sweaty when I'm talking if I leave a hoodie on, so I got to go t-shirt down here. So there you go. We are going to do some basketball talk. We haven't done much of it. To the point where we're using a video of Juwan Howard talking about NIL from like this summer as a lot of our basketball videos. So we definitely want to try to update that a little bit, and so. We're going to launch into what we just watched. I would assume that most people tuning into us right now also watched the game. Nebraska's not very good. Michigan hasn't been great either, but Nebraska really, dude, they've been blown out like a lot this year. I did a little preview article today talking about the spread. It was 11.5. I'm like, Michigan's going to cover that because when Michigan plays even decent, they're a pretty good team, and Nebraska has been beaten by 15 or more like a lot. So now Michigan has won 3 games in a row. It's technically the second time this season they've done that. But as we were talking about before we started, the first one was to start the season. So it was against Purdue, Fort Wayne, Eastern Michigan, and Pittsburgh, which you'd think Pittsburgh would have been a decent game, but Michigan beat them by 31, and they are god-awful right now. So it counts. It counts. That's a 3-game winning streak to start the season, but this is the first time they've had it since, and it's obviously during – Big Ten play and all that good stuff. So, Chris, how important right now is a 3-game winning streak? It's a young team. Now they're playing with a little confidence. Hunter Dickinson kind of settling in a little bit. They did make some dumb mistakes tonight. Again, bad turnovers against a bad team that let Nebraska cut it back down to like 10 or 9 at some point. But feel pretty good, right now about winning 3 in a row with 7 regular season games to go.
I mean, obviously you'll take a win any way you can get it. But anybody that watched, the game tonight and Michigan won convincingly. I forget what the final score was, but Michigan won comfortably, 20 points or so.
21-point win. Yep.
I just, even with a comfortable win like that, when you watch the way that they play basketball, it was clearly tonight was a game of runs, and, I don't have it in front of me, but, Michigan with a 17-point run or a 25 or 24 to 5 point run, Nebraska makes a run. It just, to me, the inconsistency with this team, and when you look at the schedule down the stretch, it's great that they've won 3 games in a row, but prior to this 3-game winning streak, I mean, you look at the schedule, lose one, so they win their first 3, then you lose one, then you win 2, lose 2, win 2, lose 2, win 2, lose 2, win 1, lose 1, win 1, lose 2. So to me, their overall picture of their schedule and the way the season's gone, you kind of saw that tonight in their game. They look good for a little while, and then they give up a lot of points. They get real sloppy. They turn the ball over, and they let a team like Nebraska right back into it. And so when you get against some of these bigger programs, I mean, those things are going to spell trouble. And to his credit, Jet Howard, phenomenal scorer, great individual player. I think they've got a lot of really good individual players on this team, but it doesn't scream like a team that can make some noise down the stretch. Certainly not a team that, if they were fortunate enough to get in the tournament, could make it very far. So it's a long-winded way of saying it's good that they've won 3 in a row, but in terms of what it does confidence-wise for me for the remainder of the year, it doesn't really do much.
I just feel like it's kind of a slightly more positive snapshot of what they've been for really like the last 2 seasons. A lot of up and downs. Some nights they shoot the ball really well. Other nights they flat out don't. They play against good teams pretty tough, and then they, like I don't know how you beat Maryland by 35 and then lose to that same team. Like I don't know how you do that. And they did that. And then, they lose to just 5 against Purdue, who's the number 1 team in the country, arguably. And then they play Eastern pretty close on a neutral court in Detroit. And you're like, what is this team? And then they lose to Central. And you're like, I just can't get a read on them. And it was like that last year, the win-loss for like 15 games in a row. Yeah. And they make a little deep run in a tournament because they are talented. They do have a Hunter Dickinson. They do have some guys who can knock down shots if they get hot. They've got the same thing this year. Jet Howard looks like one of the best shooters in the country some nights. Joey Baker looks like he's just a notch below that some nights, and then other nights it's just not there. So, yeah, I'm with you. I mean, like, they had won 2 in a row. Beating Northwestern at Northwestern was a nice win. Now you beat Nebraska by 20+, which you should have done. And so the slider moves a little bit to like, all right, maybe some things are coming together. Peaking in February and March. That's not the worst thing in the world. You see teams do it every year. And maybe Michigan is one of those teams, and we'll see how it continues to go. So my encouragement level is tempered. I mean, I'm not going crazy over a little 3-game winning streak, but
when you say encouragement, I mean in terms of what, like what it means for the rest of the season, like what do you feel encouraged by?
That's going to be the third little chunk of this discussion. So I'm encouraged now that Michigan has 7 regular season games left. They're 14-10, and it's not an all-encompassing magic number, but if a team can get to 20 wins, you start to talk about them as a tournament team, generally. Yeah. I mean, that's like generally where you need to be. I don't think Michigan's going to win out, so I don't think they're going to get to 21 wins. They've got Indiana twice. They've got Michigan State. They've got Wisconsin at the Kohl Center, which is always a tough place to play. So but on the flip side, those are quality wins that they can pick up. Quad 1 wins coming down the stretch here. So that's where my encouragement is. Like, 2 games ago, I'm like, they're not beating Indiana either of those times. They're probably not going to beat Wisconsin in the Kohl Center. But now I'm encouraged that they might be able to compete and might be able to win 2 of 4, 3 of 4 of those games. Or, I mean, dude, who knows? 4 of 4. Like, nobody in the Big Ten beyond Purdue really has dominated people this year. So I don't know. I don't know if I can rank it really, but I'm encouraged that they can win a handful of these final 7 and maybe start getting talked about as a potential tournament team. I mean, I just want them to be in the tournament, dude. The idea of them missing the tournament blows.
Do you though? Well, yeah. I mean, here's the thing. I mean, I don't think they're built to make a deep run. And we talked about it, just a couple minutes ago. It's the inconsistencies, whether it's in game, whether it's over the course of, a 15-game stretch. They don't seem to have a complete team. So even if they are able to squeak their way in, and again, you got Indiana at home, and then you go on the road to Wisconsin, then you got Michigan State at home, back on the road at Rutgers, Wisconsin, Illinois, close out against Indiana at Indiana, 2 road games to close out the season. I don't see it happening, man. The inconsistencies that we saw tonight, the sloppiness, the mental lapses, letting teams back in. You can get away with that maybe against Nebraska, but you can't get away with that against Indiana. Can't get away with that against Michigan State. Yeah. But then on the flip side, to your point, what you said earlier, Michigan has a habit of playing to the competition for better or worse. So they get on the court with a team like Purdue, and it looks like they can hang with them, and they play above, what they've been playing all season. And then they get against a team like, maybe against a Nebraska, and at certain times they just don't look very good, or a Central Michigan if you want to go back earlier in the season. And so, again, wins are great, and I think it's great that they've won 3 in a row for the first time all season, unless you count, to open the year. But when you look at the remainder of the schedule, it just looks really tough, man. And this team looks a little bit too inconsistent. And a lot of times I find myself asking, like, who's the floor leader? Like, who is the leader of this team? Who's the guy that can rally the troops on the floor? And I really don't see that with this collection of guys. I see a lot of guys who individually are pretty good, but they got a lot of work to do before they are a legit tournament team.
It does feel like if you went Michigan had the number 1 recruiting class in the country just a couple years ago. If you go man for man down their roster and compare it to a lot of other teams, like, they're right there or better than just about everybody. But you're right. There's something off with the consistency, the continuity, the chemistry, the flow. I mean, I don't know where everybody was at on Jalen Llewellyn before he got hurt. It wasn't awesome, but like, the plan was not to have true freshman Doug McDaniel running this team.
Correct.
Like, that wasn't the plan. And, I don't know, even Juwan, as his dad, did he know that Jet was going to be such a huge part of the offense and really one of the only guys who can go get a bucket whenever you need one? Kobe Buffkin's coming along a little bit. Hunter can't do it by himself because he has to work himself into position and then, rely on a guard to get him the ball. But I'm with you. I don't know, man. Looking at that schedule, it does. And I see CJ's comment. I want to be excited and say they're getting hot. They're getting hot right now. But
really?
Like, are they? They just beat Nebraska. Like, they're not good. So yeah, I'm with you.
They're an okay basketball team. Good, maybe, great, definitely not. And that's not going to get you very far in the tournament. And again, I just haven't really seen anything out of them that leads me to believe that they can put it together and make a serious run. Glad that they've won these 3 games. But again, you've got Indiana coming up here on Saturday, Wisconsin on the road, Michigan State. These next 3 games are going to tell you a lot about where this team is and will set the tone for the remainder of the schedule, especially with the Spartans at home. So we'll see. It's encouraging. 3 in a row is encouraging for sure, but I'm certainly not going to sit here and get my hopes up and think that this team can make a deep tournament run.
Yeah, it just doesn't feel like that this year. I mean, whether
or not they even make it.
Yeah, I was watching the end of the broadcast and Dave Rebson was talking about 105 different bracketology people on the giant, whatever, metric network, whatever you want to call it. Not one has Michigan in the tournament right now. So, like, that's obviously not a great sign. That's not gospel. And a team like Michigan can get hot over these final 7. And then, shoot, what if they win the Big Ten tournament? Then they're in automatically. I mean, I wouldn't bank on that, but like, there's ways to get in still. I wouldn't bet any money on it right now. Did you have the schedule?
You're a guy that likes to bet money.
I know. Well, yeah, I know. I got a bet going right now on the Sixers Celtics game. I don't want to get into it. Did you have the schedule?
Degenerate like yourself won't put money on the Wolverines.
Did you have the schedule pulled up? I feel like you were looking at it.
I do have it. Yeah.
Let's go game by game. Throw them out. Just a little spitball to put a bow on what we think might happen over the final 7 regular season games. So
let's see here. You want me to go game by game?
Yep. The next one I think is Indiana. I can't remember if it's
Indiana at home on Saturday. I'm gonna chalk that up as a loss. And then you go on the road to Wisconsin, 50-50. Where's your head at on that? On the road, Madison.
I think it's a loss. Damn it, dude. I think it's a loss. And I hate that because Wisconsin, this isn't like one of the Wisconsin teams of the past where they're just,
right.
You just don't even know how to beat them. You don't know how to approach them or what to do. And I feel like they have a better shot winning that Indiana game at home than they do Wisconsin on the road. But I'm with you. I think they might, after winning 3 in a row, it might be two L's in a row coming up here. I don't know.
Yeah, and then you got Michigan State at home in prime time. I think that's another loss. So you've lost now the next 3, and then you got to go on the road to Piscataway, number 24 Rutgers,
who's better than they've been in a long. I mean,
better than they've been, and it's a late game. So you might
You might be talking about 4 L's in a row coming up here. I mean, like that's probably the more likely. Like
best case scenario, I think they split. I think they go 2-2 over the next 4.
I don't think Michigan will be favored in any of those games.
Probably not. No, and then the last 3. So even if they split those 4, 2-2, then you've got Wisconsin back at home, and then you go on the road at Illinois, and then close out the season on the road at Indiana. So out of those next 3, there's probably another, I hate to say 2 losses, but I see 5 losses.
I mean, dude, if they 2-5 is probably most likely. 3-4, like I don't know how they finish above 500 on these final 7.
Yeah,
that blows, dude. That's
Well, of course, I don't want to chalk MSU up to a loss. I know that MSU has its flaws, and but I also can't sit here and give you my honest opinion and be like, well, they're just going to win them all. They're going to win 5 of the next 7. I can't do that based on what I've seen so far. Even if you go back and look at their schedule, they haven't put together a run like that. So could they put it together? Sure, they could absolutely do that. But based on who they've been this year, I mean, it's not likely.
I'm catching a lot of flack here, dude. This is not red. This is electric salmon.
Electric salmon? What we've already changed. What was it before? El Toro orange?
I think I said electric orange.
Electric salmon.
I'm trying to find something. I don't have anything red.
Just go shirtless. You got to go shirtless now. This is it. This is the episode.
Get the taco. No, we're not going to do that. The viewers would just drop down.
It's a late night show here. We can go topless.
Only CJ would remain.
And that would just be to crack jokes.
Probably. Yeah. So basketball, it's been kind of hard to get behind for a while because football was just rolling and on a major level.
Yeah.
And we were like, all right, when football's over, we'll get. And then basketball just hasn't been, they haven't been very good. I mean, there's no other way to slice it. They haven't been that good. They've been up and down. It's been hard to watch them some nights and not super exciting most of the time. But blank name, great name right there. I realized they just had a big win, but it was against Nebraska, and their schedule is just tough coming up. I mean, it is what it is.
Right. And look, they won again by 20 plus points. Great win. But if you watch that game, there were a lot of things you saw during that game that was concerning. You let a team like Nebraska go on several big runs to get back into it. Michigan makes mistakes, mental lapses, whatever the case is. And so it doesn't give you a lot of courage down the stretch when you look at the schedule over the next 7 games. So that's just, that's where it's at. I would love to sit up here and say, yeah, I think they're going to win 6 of the next 7, squeak their way into the tournament and make a deep run. But to me, that just doesn't seem like reality. If you look at the way this season has gone, 2 wins, 2 losses, 2 wins, 2 losses, 2 wins, 2 losses, a win, a loss, a win, a loss. That to me, that's more likely to play out here down the stretch. And when you look at who they have to play and where they have to play them, I think 4 wins is overly optimistic. That's what I think. I think 3 is probably most likely, and 2 is the second most likely. I wouldn't put my money over 3.
Yeah, I'm with you. I am with you.
I guess that's the question. I mean, do you, would you, if you're a betting man, would you take the over under on 3.5 wins over the next 7?
Under.
Exactly.
I mean, yeah, it's pretty quick. I mean, because otherwise, they'd have to win 4. Like I said, to have a winning record over these final 7, it's hard for me to see it. It's hard for me to see it. Indiana twice, including on the road once. At Rutgers, at Wisconsin. Like those 3, those are really hard games to win. Really hard games. And then you've got the rivalry in Michigan State. You've got Indiana, who's the best team probably out of that group at home coming up this weekend. I don't see them getting to 3 to 4 wins in that group. But we'll let it play out. I hope I'm wrong. Yeah, I'd love to be wrong there. Well, Chris, that brings us to our final talking point when it comes to basketball. And
yeah,
is it premature? I don't know. I think it's been floated around out there. You and I have talked about it a little bit. Juwan Howard's job stability. Juwan Howard's, I'm not going to say hot seat. It's not hot. I mean, for those out there who have heated seats in your vehicle, it might be like 1 dot, right? Is that how they usually work? You got like 1, 2, or 3.
Yeah.
Maybe like 1 dot. Juwan's seat is like 1 dot warm right now? Is that fair, or is that too much? Is that like, get out of here?
I think it's too much, man. I think, they've made deep runs in the tournament, and I know that a lot of people want to give John Beilein credit for Juwan Howard's early success, and probably a lot of that is justified. But, is it warm? I don't know, man. It feels premature, and it hasn't been a great season. But, if you look at, and I know basketball and football are different, but if you look at Jim Harbaugh, the Heat really started to turn up after like year 4 when things really weren't happening and the team kept coming up short. And so, they've made some good runs, and I like Juwan Howard, as a person. I think he's a good coach, and we'll see what the team looks like next year. And if you see more of this next year, then I think the seat starts to get warm. But, for me, it's just, I don't know, man. 2 weeks ago, you had people talking about Juwan Howard needed to be fired. Juwan Howard's not this. Juwan Howard's not that. And now, they put together 3 wins, and you have people trying to do the math on how they're going to make the tournament and how the season's still alive. And so, to me, the emotions are way too up and down over this basketball season. I think Juwan Howard is fine. I think they'll get their shit together here, over the next year or so. But yeah, college basketball is weird, man. It's a different sport in terms of recruiting and how things work. And I'm not ready to push, even give him a single dot on the warm seat quite yet.
So let me get this straight. You advocated for us to talk about Juwan Howard on the hot seat. I introduce it, say he's one dot hot, and you're like, no, he's not. And he's good. I don't know what you're talking about.
I just flipped it on you. I flipped it on. Well, here's the thing. The reason I think it should be talked about is because it was being talked about on social media quite a bit.
I know.
Was struggling. I mean, that was, if you looked on social media, fans left and right, Juwan Howard's not it. It's a coaching problem. It's Juwan. I don't know, man. I just feel like I got to give him more time.
Yeah, I mean, there are starting to be. Yeah, I did. I got set up, dude. I walked right into that. If this was like,
I like what Genro said though, that maybe Juwan is holding back something in the playbook. He doesn't want to give it all out here until the last portion of the season. Here, he's been saving it all for the last portion of the season, and Michigan's about to open it up on the court. I like that idea of thought.
It's everybody's favorite theory when it comes to why things aren't working.
Can you do that in basketball? Can you hold back in the playbook those certain special plays for Dickinson that you just don't want to show early in the year?
Or like guys who don't even play are just going to be unleashed. Yusuf Kayat comes in, Isaiah Barnes. All these guys are like, here they come.
Surprise, bitches.
Here come the real ballers. Yeah, here come the real ballers. If you wanna try to fend us off now with a bunch of guys that don't normally play. Yeah, no, I don't know.
Attorney team. No.
Nick, thank you for the donation there. Juwan is still a young coach. I think Brandon, thank you again. Set up, walked right into that. Appreciate it. Brandon's being premature. If next year's like this, then we can start to have the warm seat discussion.
I said. It's exactly what I said.
I think there has been a little bit of a trend in some things that, like rotation wise, Juwan's been a little bit like, I don't get that. And he's obviously struggled to build a roster just a little bit. The point guard position, going from transfer to transfer to transfer, as opposed to like recruiting his own guy and using him and building him up. I mean, that was a huge.
Caleb Houston and Diabate for a year. I mean, those things don't help either.
That's like a pro and a con at the same time. Like he recruited.
Is Jet Howard going to be here next year?
No, he's one and done. I mean, shocked.
That's what I'm like. There's, it's not easy because you're losing these guys. A lot of these guys are one and done if they're, significant contributors, and sometimes even if they're not. I didn't view when Caleb Houston went and when Diabate went. I viewed both of those guys as guys that should definitely return. But I'm just some dickhead in a basement talking on a microphone. But I feel like they would have been better served to have another year playing college ball. Jet Howard, I could say the same thing. Talented, great individual scorer. Do I think he would benefit tremendously from another year playing college basketball? Absolutely. Do I think the fact that his dad is the coach there might help that a little bit? Maybe, but. Juwan Howard also understands the way things work and the way the NBA works. And if he thinks his son's got a good shot at being drafted, relatively high, it's going to be hard to convince him to stay.
Yeah. And I put up an article about it yesterday or today. I can't remember actually now, where Kobe Buffkin is now starting to pop up on draft boards. I mean, his length and versatility as a potential true point guard. I know he doesn't really play the point guard position solely at Michigan, but he can. He's got the handle. He can shoot it pretty well from the outside. I mean, there aren't a lot of guards even in the NBA. And he did it tonight against Nebraska. He got a smaller guard on his back, caught the ball down on the low block and turned around and went up and dunked it with two hands off a drop step. Like, there's not a lot of guards doing that. You know, if you remember back, Chris, when we were up there for the dunk contest, I mean, he was, he's going through the legs, and he's 6'4", 6'5", lefty. Like I said, pretty smooth offensively. I think could be a really, really good defender. I'm not sure he's quite there yet, but his length and his athleticism, his foot speed certainly lends itself to being a good defender. And so now he's starting to pop up on some draft boards. That was the title of the article was, 2 Wolverine hoopers are potentially done after this year. Yeah. One being a surprise in Kobe Buffkin and one not in Jet Howard. So, yeah, like I said, that's like a pro and a con. Like, Juwan's recruiting these guys, bringing them in, and then they leave after a year. Like, that sucks for roster development, but like, all right, your coach just got you an NBA talent type of player for a season, and like that's kind of how college basketball works right now. So, yeah, man, it's a little tricky. I caught a lot of, I'll put it this way, I caught a lot of flack for having even one like remotely critical word about Juwan Howard when he was hired. And like, he's a fan favorite. He's a Fab Five, tons of experience in the NBA. I'm like, cool. He's never been a head coach before, and he just got handed the keys to a Ferrari. John Beilein had built this program up to one of the top 10 programs in the entire country year in and year out. And I'm like, if he didn't play at Michigan, he's not getting that caliber of a job. And people just thought I was nuts. And, he won a Big Ten championship in year one. So then I was like, well, I'm an idiot. I mean, like, of course I was wrong. But now some of the things I was a little concerned about seem to be popping up a little bit. I'm not saying like, I told you so. Like, I don't want Juwan Howard to leave, but it definitely seems like he's fun to cover. He's a good dude to talk to. He does recruit talented players that play an exciting brand, but there's been some things that have just been a little bit off. And, he's in year 4 now, and the trajectory is kind of doing this as opposed to this. And that's not usually what you like to see, even though he is a young coach and he's only been doing it for, not even 4 full seasons yet. So I don't know. Yeah. Chris, if they don't make the tournament, if the Michigan basketball team doesn't make the tournament, whatever that means for the NIT or something else like that, where will you be at the end of this season getting ready to head into his 5th year as Michigan's head coach?
Pretty much.
I think you kind of said it. I think you said it might be a little warmer, but like not.
Maybe, not but yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at right now, man. I think, to your point, yeah, he's never been a head coach before. He's a young guy, and John Beilein obviously had the program up and running and humming the way that Beilein wanted the program built. And Juwan Howard's a different guy with a different philosophy, and so. If we were willing to be patient with Jim Harbaugh, then I think we got to be willing to be patient with Juwan Howard and kind of let him, give him some time to get this thing right. And it's not like he hasn't had any success. I mean, they've made the Sweet 16. They've had success with him leading the way, win a Big Ten championship. So, yeah, I think it's a little bit premature.
Were you willing to be patient with Jim Harbaugh? Because I really wasn't.
I was for the first 4 years, and then year 5, I lost my patience.
After 2020, I was like, done. I'm had it. Yeah, get them out.
And if a lot of people out there are being honest, they were there too. There was a very small segment of the fan base that was like, no, just give it time, because nobody saw 2021 coming. Maybe with the exception of Jim Harbaugh himself, but. It was an incredible turnaround, and the rest is sort of history. You look at 2021 and 22, and it's been great. So I think it's a good thing that they kept him. But it's everything when you have the luxury of hindsight, that's great. In 2020, we didn't have that, and it was year after year of coming up short. And so again, I don't think Juwan Howard is there.
Yeah. So speaking of the head football coach, we talked about it, Chris. I know it's kind of hard. Like I try to sit back and remember, like, what did we last talk about? It was a week ago, and the week before that we skipped one. So we're not gonna beat the dead horse again. But here we are now, approaching mid-February, spring football a couple weeks away, the spring game
So
less than 2
excited for
months
spring
away.
football, spring game. I mean, it's not that far away.
Yeah, it's not that far away. I mean, we're going to talk a little bit about, we saw some of the workout things happening. Some numbers have been leaked out there, some videos, some stuff like that. We'll talk about that more as the weeks move on, and some articles and stuff like that. But Jim Harbaugh now, obviously at Michigan, he's here, he's back. I talked about it on Jamie Morris's radio show today. I talked about it here before, where he put out the statement where he's like, "Oh, don't try to outdo Happy," or whatever. I don't remember the exact quote, but he said, "Don't try to out Happy or something like that." And I'm thinking, like, did he still not say he's coming back to coach for sure? Like, am I crazy? And then we talked about the Broncos thing, where he apparently had another meeting, but it looked like it was more from the Broncos side, but it still happened, and like just all this back and forth. So like, this is just what happens now, right? You can't believe him anymore about like never, not doing it again, Ward. Meanwhile, where is Ward Manuel? He
put out some sort of statement. It wasn't about football specifically, I don't think, but he is alive. I did see him put out some sort of statement about, I think it was about all sports in general, or what they've done across the board. So it was good to hear from him.
So glad to see Ward Manuel still out there doing his thing. But so now, like, this is just what you get. This is part of the Jim Harbaugh package. Every January, February, and I know it's been that way ever since he came back, because he was so good in the NFL. But for the last 2 and 3 years, if you want my opinion, he's been actively trying to get back to the league. I don't really know about the years before that, when, I mean, literally, there are like screenshots out there of like every single year when the football season got over with, it was like, Jim Harbaugh back to the NFL. Jim Harbaugh might be up for this job. The last 3 years, it was real. We know it was real. 2 for sure. Is this just what you get now with Jim Harbaugh? Because they're going to win 12 or 13 games again. He's going to be in the discussion for Coach of the Year again. There's going to be open NFL jobs again. I mean, it's just going to be lather, rinse, repeat until he hangs up the whistle. I mean, that's just what I feel like.
I don't think so, man. I honestly feel like this was the last, if you subscribe to the idea that he was still willing to take a look, which, it's clear that there was some interest. Now, I think 2 things can be true at once. I think that there was some interest from him to return to the NFL after this last season, but I also think that there was a bigger part of him that wanted to stay at Michigan. But there were some things at Michigan that needed to be fixed, needed to be worked out. And so you kind of live in a world where you're entertaining your opportunities. But given the fact that he's coming back to Michigan, probably going to sign a long-term deal, lucrative deal, going to be, if not, should be the highest paid coach in the Big Ten, one of the highest paid coaches in college football. I just don't think that from his side, this is going to become an issue. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not going to be reports, come January of this year that, Harbaugh to this NFL job, or Harbaugh that, like, I think those things are still going to happen. And that's going to be part of having him as head coach, as Michigan fans are now well aware of. But in terms of interest from his side, taking meetings, having discussions with these teams, I don't think it's going to happen, man. I feel like this was the last year, and I feel like it's, he's made a decision now at this point to remain at the University of Michigan. That's how I feel.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know. Well, we've talked about it. We've talked about how the NFL is not hiring dudes like Jim Harbaugh. They're hiring dudes like Sean McVay and these young guys that are, Nick Sirianni, and got, I take that back. The Broncos just hired Sean Payton, who is a very similar in age to Jim Harbaugh, actually.
Yeah.
But
he's also, he hasn't been out of the league for a decade.
Yeah. I mean, every year that Harbaugh stays at Michigan is another like push away from the NFL. I agree with you on that. But he's going to be really good again next year. Michigan's going to win a lot of games. He's going to look like one of the more accomplished head coaches in the country for the 3rd year in a row. I mean, it's playoff or bust at this point with this program, and I think they're going to be right back in the mix. And that's going to get some attention. Now as we look and kind of look back and see these teams that have been like, all the jobs that I thought made the most sense for Harbaugh have now been open, and he hasn't gone there. So it was the Bears, it was the Colts, he had a connection with some people at the Vikings. He's knows the brain trust or whoever, whatever. I don't know the exact titles, but a bunch of people at Denver from his days at Stanford. So it kind of feels like, all right, if it wasn't any of those teams, it's probably not going to be anybody else. The Raiders, Al Davis and the Davis family from his first gig as a coach. So yeah, it kind of feels like if there were 5 or 6 ships that he could have been on, they've all kind of sailed. And so I guess we'll see. But I think the same things that make him intriguing to the NFL are going to be the exact same things next year.
Here's what I'll say. I can't, after these last 2 years, I can't see a scenario where he takes another meeting with an NFL team. That would just, taking off my supposed to be impartial, and when you cover the team and you kind of lose your as a fan, I would be pissed off if he took another meeting with an NFL team, because like you said, Michigan's probably going to be favored in every single regular season game they play this upcoming season, including Ohio State at home. They go on the road, they play Penn State late in the season. I think that's going to be a difficult game. But when you look at the makeup of this roster, when you look at the coaching staff, especially some of the newer additions that have come out, I think they are primed to make another playoff run, to make it 3 straight wins over Ohio State, 3 straight Big Ten championships, find themselves right in the playoffs again. And we talked about this on the phone not too long ago, that I don't think there is a dominant college football team out there. There isn't, the Bamas of, the recent past, the Clemsons of the recent past, the way that Georgia kind of was last year, and to a certain extent, the way they were this year.
They're the closest thing to it, but it's not like Bama from 5-6 years ago. Yeah.
So to me, it sets up really nicely for Michigan to make a deep run, get back into the playoff, and to actually get themselves to the national championship game. And if they can do that, I think they're going to have as good of a shot as anybody at actually winning the national championship. That's why, look, 3 years ago, we were on this podcast heading into the 2021 season. I specifically remember I picked 8-4 regular season record.
I think you said 9-3, and I was
9-3.
I was hitting the slurp button,
and it was slurp fest. It was the idea that this program would win 9 games. It seemed like a pipe dream. No, you guys weren't buying into it. And now here we are, and we haven't really put out our official picks yet, but I can tell you for a fact that you and I are going to pick them to win every single game. Now, I did write an article where I do think they're going to lose 1 regular season game. I do think that's going to happen. They've got a tough stretch where they play 5 road games out of 7 games. There's a 7-game stretch where they play 5 games on the road. And you're talking about at East Lansing, at Happy Valley. They've got to go to some tough environments. And so I do think they drop a regular season game, but I don't think it prevents them from winning a conference championship. I don't think it keeps them out of the playoff. And in fact, I do think they're going to win a national championship. And so that just speaks to how far this program has come in such a short amount of time. And like I was saying earlier, I don't think there's another juggernaut program out there that can stop Michigan from this path that they're going to be on in 2023. They are bringing back a lot of talent, arguably the best offensive line in college football. To me, I don't even think it's a question that they got the best duo in the backfield with Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards. You've got J.J. McCarthy, who, Pro Football Focus College just ranked as one of the top 10 returning quarterbacks. He's got a year of experience under his belt, tremendously talented. And then you go over to the defensive side of the ball, Chris Jenkins, top 10 defensive lineman, according to Pro Football Focus. Mike Sainristil, Will Johnson, guys like Junior Coles. You have a ton of talent on the defensive side of the ball. Offensively, they look stacked. I just don't think anybody's going to be able to stop Michigan this year.
Pulled it out, showed it to you.
I really
Did that even answer your question? I can't even remember. I kind of blacked out there. I don't even remember what you asked.
Blah, you just came back. You were like,
yeah, Michigan's winning it all.
I really I'm looking at I just missed the drop board, dude.
I promise I'm not going to spend a lot of time on my torso here.
I really
just can you flip it on to use your drop and then flip it back off? It changes the way I hear things.
Such a puzzling question. All right, I'll turn it back off now. I gotta do it. If I screwed up your audio, Chris, I apologize, but I'm looking at some of the buttons again, and I really missed it. What were we talking about? Yeah, so Michigan.
That's what I'm saying. I'm blacked out.
Michigan's pretty good at football. They're going to be good at it again. yeah, we talked about this, man. Of the 4 playoff teams, only one has a returning quarterback, and that's Michigan and JJ McCarthy, and he looks poised to be better than ever before. He's going to have a whole offseason of like,
no Stroud,
man.
No Bennett, JJ McCarthy.
I'm the man. No more Cade. No more, am I the starter? Am I not? No more, I'm starting here. He's starting there. He's the guy, and he knows he's the guy, and he's going to be working with all of his dudes, and it's going to be, I'm telling you, man, they're going to be poised to have another massive run this upcoming season, and getting Ohio State back in Ann Arbor, back at the big house, where I don't know, man, it just feels like.
Hold on, so for a Pistons fan, no, not handing them out just like that. I mean, again, look at the roster. When it comes to Blake Corum, you could make a strong argument that if Corum doesn't get injured, I mean, it's almost certain that he finishes with the most rushing yards last season in college football. And there's a pretty good chance, if you look at who won the Heisman Trophy, that Blake Corum not only would have been invited to New York, but he may have won it, had a good shot at actually winning it. So you've got a Heisman Trophy candidate for sure in Blake Corum returning. You've got JJ McCarthy, who, again, is one of the top quarterbacks in college football. I know he didn't have the greatest game against TCU in the semifinal, but he did a lot of things that looked promising too. He didn't get in the tank when he made some mistakes, came back, threw some beautiful balls. Make sure you save that as a drop. So there's a lot to like about a true dual threat, a guy that can get out and burn a defense with his legs. I like this team offensively. I like this team defensively. They have, like I said, probably the best offensive line in college football. When you go through it piece by piece and you look at this roster top to bottom, I think they have one of the most complete teams in all of college football. And so, no, and to the other part of your statement there about the SEC recruiting, that isn't going to mean shit in 2023. I mean, Michigan has the team now to win a national championship. And so, you might see some effect of it down the road. You might see it, 2024, 2025, we'll see what happens. But then again, give Michigan credit for the way they've utilized the transfer portal, brought in surefire guys that are probably going to start. They've got experience. I mean, you're talking about guys with 20 plus starts under their belt playing Division I football. One of the top centers in the country. They went and got out of the transfer portal. So I don't know. You can't just look at recruiting rankings. And when it comes to this season in particular, recruiting rankings don't mean shit. It's who they have now. And who they have now, they've got a lot of guys that are arguably the best at their position on both sides of the
ball. Apologies. Not trying to ignore the Steve Deese burner account for the super chat. Like, look, if we don't get to it right away, I'll come back to it. I'm sorry, dude. Don't be upset. And it's such a hard hitter too. Let me tell you.
Oh my goodness,
Chris, where can he get the hoodie?
You can get it at wingedhelmetgear.com. Wingedhelmetgear.com. You can go on there and get one of those hoodies.
I explained why I don't wear a hoodie. I start to sweat.
Brandon sweats. He's 1 degree away from being topless on the show.
Well,
so don't turn up the heat.
Actually,
but yes, you can go to wingedhelmetgear.com and get yourself a sweatshirt.
So we talked about Jim Harbaugh and his flirtation with the NFL and how it's affected the current team, which we learned from Ozzie Smith. Maybe not that much at all. Recruiting,
they don't care.
I can get on board with it affecting recruiting a little bit. Recruits want to know who their head coach is going to be, and not only that, but if a head coach leaves, there's a pretty good chance that the assistant coaches also leave. So, like, it's a much bigger deal on the recruiting trail, and that's where Chris's point is valid. Like, you're not going to see it in 2023. The pieces are here, but this 18th, 19th, 20th ranked class will start to pop up in 24, 25, 26. When these guys are.
But doesn't matter with the portal.
Program. That's certainly.
I think I've made
valid.
that transition now, where it's like, Michigan nationally was number 18 in recruiting rankings, number 3 in the Big Ten. And then you factor in the guys that they nabbed out of the transfer portal, and I think they did just fine. Like, I don't know. Today's college football is different in terms of what you can do, in the portal. And I think people have to take a better look at it. And it seems like Jim Harbaugh and the Michigan coaching staff are pretty focused on that, because if you look at the guy, Olu, The best center in the country last year came from the transfer portal. They're doing a phenomenal job in landing guys in the transfer portal that legitimately want to compete for national championships. So I'm not all that worried about recruiting rankings. You'd like to see it be a little bit higher, but if you can go out and you can nab guys, I mean, I think Brandon on one of the previous shows, you equated them to being like 6 or 7 stars. These are guys with, in the teens of starts or 20 plus starts who have been very good at their position. Starters. If you can bring them onto your roster and plug them in and they fit within the culture and they can make an immediate impact, that's, to me, there's so much more value in that than anything you might get on the recruiting trail.
I mean, I know he left, so he's not the best example now, but like, how would you grade if you're looking at him as a new player in your program, like an Iabi Oki? Like, he was a 5-star coming out of high school. Yeah. Now he's got 3 years of college experience. He's played, he's started, he's accumulated stats. He's older, he's wiser, he's been in the strength and conditioning. Like, that's a 6 or 7-star recruit. That's what I meant by saying that.
At Charlotte, you're happy to have him. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, certainly at a place like
impact
that.
Player.
So Olu was that guy. Mike Dana a couple seasons ago was a very productive player. Yeah. I mean, several transfer quarterbacks that played under Jim Harbaugh.
Patterson, Jake Rudock, and you can go back a while.
And now it's even more prevalent. And this year, I mean, dude, when you look at the 7 or 8 guys, however many it was that they hauled in, you could see 3 of them. You could see 3 of them start on the O-line. Realistically, yeah. Ernest Hausman might come in and be the best linebacker on the team. And I love Junior Colson, but Hausman was even more productive at Nebraska. So, like, what's that going to look like? The backup tight end, backup quarterback for depth, and all of a sudden you're kind of off and running. And I don't think Michigan's done either. I think they were kicking the tires with that cornerback that committed to Ohio State. Would have been really nice to pair him up with Will Johnson. Didn't happen, but yeah. So Michigan's still kind of looking to build the roster that way.
You've got Marion Walker primed and ready to take over that position. Blazing speed.
I didn't know how much we were going to get into that because I know you're going to do a little bit with it, but we'll do that at the end. Because there's a couple other things I want to get into that kind of go in order with this. So we talked about Harbaugh. Meanwhile, he might be dinking around a little bit. Oh, the Broncos, cool. Let me check some stuff out. But he's making some good moves. He hired Kirk Campbell, the quarterback's coach. We talked about him last week. I like it on the surface. Still don't know a whole lot about him, and you're not going to until we get a chance to talk to him and we see how involved he is. We hear what the players have to say about him. We see if anything looks different on game day or at spring ball or whatever. But on paper, I like it. Offensive coordinator, former play caller, coached quarterbacks before, and is apparently a decent recruiter. That's better than Matt Weiss came to the table with. He didn't have any of that stuff.
No doubt.
He'd never coached quarterbacks before. He was not a recruiter. He was kind of weird, and he was an NFL guy. He wasn't even a college guy. So on paper, I like Kirk Campbell more. So that was last week. Now, we find out today that Michigan has rehired Chris Partridge. We don't know the role yet. I think it just said football staff on his official release.
Nothing official yet.
And it's a little bit strange because Michigan is full. They have all 10 assistant spots filled up. So I find it hard to believe that Chris Partridge would leave he got fired, but would leave his post as a DC and come to Michigan as an analyst. There's plenty of programs out there who would take a dude like that and make him their coordinator. So that means someone's probably on the way out. Now, this isn't like speculation in a weird way, but George Hilo has been mentioned among some people as a potential defensive coordinator. I don't think Mike Hart's going anywhere now at this point, but he looked at a head coaching job earlier in the year. I said this on Jamie Morris's show earlier today. Like, Jim Harbaugh was like damn near shoving Sharon Moore out the door. He was being so complimentary of him. It looks like he's staying put now. Yep. But like for a while there, I'm like, Jim, like, he's pretty good, dude. Will you shut up a little bit? Like, tongue in cheek, obviously, but he was so complimentary of Sharon that we were almost like, dude, like, is Harbaugh like planning on leaving already? And Sharon's going to take over, whatever the case may be. The Partridge hire, Chris. Now, I used to cover recruiting when Partridge was kind of doing this thing, and he was a killer on the recruiting trail. Got down into SEC country, tons of roots in New Jersey. I'm curious to see what that looks like moving forward. But as a whole, it's all good, right? I mean, there's nothing bad you can say about bringing that dude back.
No, I mean, had a hand in, guys like Rashawn Gary, Jabril Peppers. I mean, some of the top players to come to Michigan, and, culture guy, energy guy. Players seem to love having him around. And so, I think it's a net positive no matter how you look at it from every single angle, getting Chris Partridge back. Because when he left, it felt like a big loss. Like I remember that when he took the Ole Miss job, I was like, damn, that's one of the top recruiters that Michigan has. And now to have him back, it feels like it's Michigan, taking another step forward to try to get better on the recruiting trail. And there's a lot of people out there that are concerned with some of the positions that he might be able to help with. So yeah, very, very glad he's back in Ann Arbor. There's no doubt.
Yep. So Steve Deese burner, here we go. Right out this, right within the minute. The new coaching hires, success on the field next year will result in a significant bump in the recruiting for Michigan moving forward, with the exception Jim doesn't twerk. If he's been twerking for the NFL, then maybe that's why he's not getting the job. I don't know. Wow. But yeah, I mean, I want to believe that. I really want to believe that. But there are certainly some issues with NIL still that's leading to Michigan not being able to land some of these guys. And I touched on this before too. The offense that Michigan runs just doesn't lend itself well to landing the top flight recruits in the country. And I've said this, the recruiting rankings are skewed towards the skill guys. Yeah. Wide receivers, running backs, quarterbacks make up like a bulk of the higher rated guys. Now, of course, there's tons of high-rated corners and DNs and there's all across the board. But like guys who get the ball and put up a ton of numbers in high school, it's real easy to make them highly ranked recruits. And Michigan just isn't going to get a lot of those guys. They're just not. Now, why they're not landing top-flight running backs, I'm not really sure. We've talked about this before. But receivers and quarterbacks, I mean, Dante Moore is now out at UCLA. Jaden Davis has been handed a pen and a paper for months to sign to sign up with Michigan, and he won't. And you can't really blame him at this point. I mean, like 5-star high school quarterbacks don't want to throw 18 touchdowns. They just don't. And so there's a little bit of that involved as well. But it's like we just talked about. Like if you can supplement your active roster with the portal and develop enough guys as recruits to where you never really have any of these gap years, we might be seeing a complete evolution in roster building in college football, and Jim Harbaugh might be out in front of it. I don't know if other teams are doing it as well, but Michigan's now been to the playoff 2 years in a row, beat Ohio State 2 years in a row, won 2 Big Ten championships, and is doing it with key guys that they got just that year from the portal. And I think they're about to do it again. So I don't know, man. I mean, it just feels like he's got something figured out that I don't know. Like Jimbo Fisher certainly doesn't have it figured out. I can tell you that. Right. There's some guys out there who are really struggling with this.
I mean, we've talked about it that if you are, if you're one of the top wide receivers in the country, I'm just not sure why you would want to come to the University of Michigan just based on the way the offense is. But if you're one of the top running backs in the country, if you're a top offensive lineman, top tight end, any of the defensive positions, then to me, Michigan makes sense. And at the end of the day, when you boil it all down, the way that Jim Harbaugh is running things is working. They've been the best team in the Big Ten for the last 2 years. Championships, beating Ohio State, getting to the college football playoff. That's what it's all about. And so if they don't need to recruit top flight wide receivers in this type of offense. I mean, if you can get,
fair point.
Marion Walker wasn't he a 3-star?
I'm pretty sure he was a 4-star.
Was he a 4-star? I thought I saw he was a 3-star.
Clemens certainly was a 4-star. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, you don't necessarily need Ronnie Bell. I mean, Michigan's top receiver last year. How many stars did he have? How many offers did he have? And then look what he turned into. And so I'm at a point now. I've like I said, I'm a born again where I trust in the process of what Jim Harbaugh is doing, the way he's building the roster. Feels like they've got some things figured out, and it's really hard to question it from the way they recruit to the coaching hires that he's making now, to the way that they run the offense. I know spent the last 2 years for the majority of the first part of the season pounding the table that this offense can't work. You've got to change it. You've got to do things different. And again, when you're beating Ohio State and winning Big Ten championships, to me, anything beyond that feels like icing on the cake. And this program's even to a point now where a loss in the college football playoff semifinal feels like it wasn't enough.
Yeah,
it wasn't enough. And that just speaks to how far this program has come. And so Yeah, I don't question it at all. To me, the recruiting rankings I'm not worried about. I don't question Jim Harbaugh's methods at this point. It's working.
Interesting question here, Chris, but as two sneakerheads, I think we can both jump on it real quick. We don't have to spend a lot of time, but CS wants to know Reebok Classic sneakers,
No.
Air Force Ones, or Nike Waffles. It's Forces.
Give me Air Force Ones.
It's
I
Forces.
don't even know what the hell Nike waffle joggers are.
Well, those are one of the original pairs that were made back in the day with an actual like waffle iron. They've got that pattern on the bottom, more like a track shoe. But
no idea.
Yeah, the Air Maxes might have that waffle bottom. I'm not sure, which I got a pair of those upstairs. Anyway, yeah, Forces, preferably black ones. All black Forces.
All black.
For nefarious activities. That's what that's all about right there. All right, we're gonna finish up with this, Chris, and we kind of just did it, but this was something like on a smaller scale that you and I both, I don't know, 8-9 weeks kind of before we finally just accepted what things were. And I was talking about this with Jamie and them on the show today too. They kind of just asked flat out, like, is anything wrong with Michigan's program right now? And I just started kind of going into it. I said, well, you'd rather your quarterback coach not get arrested for like criminal computer crimes and get fired. You'd probably rather your head coach not flirt with NFL teams year after year after he said he's not going to. You'd probably rather not be under NCAA investigation with penalties looming. You'd probably not have an NIL program waffling around in the darkness when you should be one of the best programs at it in the country. And you'd probably not, not expect to have a class recruiting ranking be ranked in the, I don't know where it finished, 18, 19, 20, 21, somewhere in there after the 2-year run that you're just having. All of those things not ideal, yet everything feels fine and Michigan's going to whoop ass again next. It's like the weirdest dynamic of anything I've ever covered. Now, granted, I haven't been doing this for 50 years, but I'm coming up on a decade now, and this is just bizarre, dude. It's bizarre across the board with how Michigan can't get out of its own way. These little stupid things keep happening, and yet they just kind of seem to be rolling along, and they are going to be dominant again next year. It's just weird. I don't know how else to explain it.
That's why none of that stuff, when you went down the list, none of it matters to me, because when I look at the schedule, I think they're going to win, maybe with the exception of one, every single game during the regular season. I think they're going to win another conference championship. And like I said earlier, I think they're going to win a national championship. I think CJ asked the question in the comments, Harbaugh's process obviously good enough now to win the Big Ten, but can it win them a national championship? And I think it can. I think there's some things that they can improve on from last year. But I don't want to sound like a broken record here. Look at the roster defensively. Look at the roster offensively. Look at the experience, the guys that they have returning, the guys that they went and got out of the portal. This to me feels like easily one of the top teams in the country, and probably preseason they're going to be ranked number 3 at worst. That's where I'm at. Number 3 at worst. When you look at who they have coming back, I can't see them below number 3.
Could you not? I think they should be number 2.
That's where I think they should be. Georgia.
I think they should be
Michigan.
number 2 behind Georgia. Like, I guess in theory you could say maybe beat TCU because they beat, but like TCU's not going to be as good next year. That was a fluky run they had this year.
No.
And Max Duggan's gone. So
the only thing I could see is maybe you throw Bama back up there, like we talked about. I think we talked about. They
didn't even make the playoff, and now they don't have Bryce Young. So
but they're Bama.
I know they're
Bama, and they're Nick Saban, and that's just kind of how things work. But I don't think Michigan's going to be like I said, at worst they'll be ranked number 3. Probably should be ranked number 2, and they're going to spend the vast majority of the season with that ranking.
Yeah.
So
how do you justify putting in Ohio State ahead of Michigan? Because they like that. That's going to be talked about too.
Unless you're just. You don't.
You can't. Matt Kirby. I also brought up USC to Chris. Chris, what you were putting something together, and I mentioned USC as a team to kind of keep an eye on.
Yeah, it was the 5. What was it? 5 reasons Michigan's going to win the national champ, or 5 predictions for next year. I think that's what it was. 5 predictions for 2023, and my final prediction was that Michigan was going to win the national championship. And one of the reasons that we talked about was because J.J. McCarthy is the only quarterback that played in the college football playoff that's coming back. You mentioned how USC could be a player. I certainly think they could, but
They got a lot of talent. They're bringing back Caleb Williams.
They do.
I mean, that's where that's where it goes. But yeah, we've done it on previous episodes. You try to go down the list, and you can't really find a weakness on this Michigan team. Starting corner, like that is literally it, dude. That's literally the only spot on the field where you're like, not real sure. I'm not real sure what that's going to look like. Everywhere else, set. The O-line, we don't know which 5, but like, do they go like 10 deep? I saw somebody tweeted today somewhere. I think it was just a random person was like, Michigan's second string offensive line could start for a lot of Big Ten teams. And that's like, dude, somebody out of Ladarius Henderson, Miles Hinton, Carson Barnhart, Trente Jones, 2 of those guys are not playing next year. That's bananas. Right. So yeah, I don't know how you pencil. I know you said a loss will come. I don't know really. I know you were trying to be bold and just find something. It's not a crazy reach to say that they
imagine, but even that's crazy to me. Think about that predicting Michigan to lose just one regular season game. People are at a point where they're like, wow, no, there's no way. And I mean, 3 years ago, the idea that they would win every single game, you were a complete slap who was slurping on the pole or whatever the hell that, whatever the phrase was that was used.
1 hour and 1 minute.
Listen, I think Michigan is stacked top to bottom. Really excited to see them in the spring. Really excited to see them compete in the fall. I do think the loss, unfortunately, comes in Happy Valley. I think it comes at Penn State. You're talking about a late season game. It's probably going to be in prime time. Michigan's going to be ranked number 2, if not number 1 at that point. You're going to go to Happy Valley. It's going to be a whiteout night game, primetime type deal. And, if Michigan does stumble, I think that's where it happens. And again, that game occurs in the midst of a 7-game stretch where 5 of those are on the road. And you're talking about going to Minnesota. I don't have it in front of me, but they got to go play in some tough environments.
Tough stretch for sure. At Minnesota, at Penn State, at Maryland.
At Maryland, yeah.
And then Michigan State is also in there. Obviously.
At Michigan State. So that's what it is. It's at, and I don't know if it's in order, but at Michigan State, at Minnesota, at Penn State, at what? Now I've lost it.
Maryland.
There you go.
Yeah.
Was there one more in there?
There was one more, pretty tough one, if I'm not mistaken.
Just pull it up.
Anyway,
pull it up.
Yeah, I mean that's a tough 7-game stretch when you've got 5 of them on the road. Lease burner account. Thank you tonight, man. Really appreciate it. I think Michigan has over a 35% chance of legitimately winning a national championship in 2023 and over a 50% chance of making the national championship. I do too. They're going to be favored in every game for the first 11 and probably should be favored against Ohio State for the first time in a long time. After beating
here's the stretch, just so that I have it in front of me. So it starts at Nebraska, at Minnesota, then you play Indiana at home, then you go on the road, play at Michigan State, back home versus Purdue, and then you're at Penn State, at Maryland, close out the season at home against Ohio State.
Yeah, that at Nebraska game is really interesting now too with Matt Rule and a new system. And
yeah, at Nebraska, at Minnesota, home against Indy, and then at Michigan State.
I mean, Nebraska
and Happy Valley.
Nebraska gave Michigan a fit here and there with old Dink Scott Frost running the show. So like, you get back into Lincoln, you get back into that stadium with a new regime and somebody who's proven to win. That could be tricky. But
you know what? Can we just talk about that a little bit? This whole big noon bullshit. I know that there are a lot of people that love these noon kicks. I don't. I mean, did Michigan even have a 3:30 kick this last season? Not that I can remember. If they did, it was one at most, because I can't remember. I mean, I am over the big noon shit. And if Michigan, I would like to see Michigan go on the road in Happy Valley, play them at night in a whiteout. To me, that's part of what makes college football great. And Michigan, like I said, is going to be ranked high. I would hate for that game to be a noon kickoff.
Yeah,
don't do that to me.
It will be there. Can you imagine? The night game white. That's
what I'm saying. I want it at night. I want the fireworks. I want the whiteout. I want to see it.
Yeah, I want that. Pulled it out, showed it to you.
Pulled it out, showed it to you.
Oh boy.
Dude,
Well,
life without football is difficult, man.
it is difficult, man.
I don't like it. I don't like it, particularly when the basketball team isn't doing great.
We're going to start our fade out music.
A 3-game winning streak, by the way.
I'm going to re-reference at about the 41-minute
You know
mark.
what? Screw Fox. They're on my shit list. Their whole big noon kickoff can get effed. And their camera crew there, their little cord management, I'll be looking out. Listen, I will never forget that man's face. I will see him in 2023. We are not finished. I'm going to rearrange the schnoz on that homeboy. Coming.
Well, somewhere
these things go.
Somewhere at the 41-minute mark, you said beautiful balls, very aggressively.
Beautiful balls.
And then at the 1 hour, 1 minute mark, talking about slurping poles.
I didn't mean to say slurp in the poll per se. It just came out wrong. But
that's exactly what you said. I gotta grab these. I write them down like every time, and then we haven't been using the soundboard either. That's
you know what though? It has been nice not having that echo. It's been great.
Yeah, I can imagine. All right, well, there you have it.
In a row, I haven't had to go out and come back in.
Nice little Wednesday show. We'll be back next Wednesday, maybe before that if necessary. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in with us at damn near 10 o'clock at night, man. How about that? But yeah, basketball game on, is it Saturday? Against
Saturday.
Indiana?
Yes, sir.
Be a big win if they could get it. Give us something fun to talk about next week. But, yeah, we'll see how that goes. So thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We will see you guys on Wednesday.